We all long for happiness, yet it is so often the brush of sorrow that teaches us how precious it truly is. In the Buddha's own journey, awakening began not in comfort, but in a clear gaze at life's inescapable truths. Birth, aging, illness, and death. From that honest seeing came compassion and freedom. Let this be our lantern tonight. Suffering is not a full stop. It is a doorway, an entry into understanding, a chance to change, and a tender invitation to cherish the life we have. Welcome, Moonlight Temple. In this gentle space, we'll move unhurriedly through classic Buddhist tales and simple Zen insights, and we'll translate them into everyday practice: how to soften anger, meet grief with wisdom, breathe through fear, and recognize joy when it arrives. You will leave with clear, practical steps, short breathing pauses, thought reframes, and small, steady habits that lighten the heart and steady the mind. As we settle in, notice your breath as it arrives and leaves, like a tide on a quiet shore. If a memory of pain surfaces, let it rest beside you, not on you. Which part of your life is asking to be seen with kinder eyes? In a few moments, we'll begin our first story and let it carry us toward relief and insight. If this path speaks to you, stay close to the bell, the breath, and this community. Please like, share, and subscribe to support Moonlight Temple so more hearts can find their way home. Chapter 1. Recognizing Suffering. Part 1. The universal nature of suffering. There is a quiet truth that all of humanity shares. Whether we live in the mountains or by the sea, whether we are rich or poor, whether we call ourselves believers or skeptics, it is the truth that every heart, at some point, meets sorrow. It may come softly, like a faint ache in the background of a busy day, or it may arrive like a storm that tears everything apart. Yet beneath every form it takes, suffering carries the same silent message. This, too, is part of being alive. The Buddha began his journey not by escaping suffering, but by looking deeply into it. As a young prince surrounded by luxury, Siddhartha Gautama had every comfort the world could offer. Yet one day, he stepped beyond the palace walls and saw what no gold or music could hide. An old man bent with time, a sick man shivering in pain, a corpse carried to its rest, and finally, a wandering monk whose eyes were calm in the face of all that decay. Those four encounters shook him to the core. They awakened in him the question that lives secretly in every human heart. Why do we suffer? And can this suffering ever end? From that question, the path to enlightenment was born. The Buddha did not turn away. He didn't cover his eyes. He stayed with what was painful until he saw through it, until he understood that suffering is not a curse, but a teacher. It shows us that everything we hold is fragile. It asks us to stop grasping at what will change, to stop running from what must be faced, and to find peace not in escape, but in understanding. To live is to experience change, and with change comes loss. Every breath we take is both a birth and a death. Something ends so something else may begin. This is the rhythm of existence itself. And yet, we often forget this. We grow attached to how things are when they feel good, and we resist them fiercely when they feel uncomfortable. We believe happiness lies in holding on, and that pain means something has gone wrong. But the Buddha taught that this very clinging, the longing for permanence in a world that never stops changing, is what keeps the wheel of suffering turning. Suffering takes many shapes. It's not only found in tragedies and heartbreaks, but also in the quiet unrest of wanting more, in the exhaustion of chasing perfection, in the subtle fear of losing what we love. A toothache, a harsh word, the loss of a job, the loneliness of success, they all point back to the same truth. When we depend entirely on outer conditions for peace, peace will always slip away. The Buddha called this dukkha, a word that means much more than pain. It describes the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. Even moments of joy carry a shadow, because deep down we know they will pass. That awareness makes the heart uneasy, grasping for what it cannot keep. But when we see this clearly, not as philosophy, but as direct experience, something softens. Compassion begins to bloom. When we realize that everyone carries some form of pain, the neighbor next door, the stranger on the bus, the friend who always smiles, the walls of separation start to fall. We begin to understand that no one is exempt and no one is alone. This shared vulnerability is not weakness. It is the root of empathy. It's what allows us to look at another person and silently say, I understand. I, too, have walked through the fire. The Buddha's insight into suffering was not meant to make life gloomy or heavy. It was meant to open our eyes to reality so we could stop fighting it. Like a physician diagnosing an illness, he named the truth not to frighten us, but to heal us. If we do not see where the wound is, how can we treat it? The first noble truth, that there is suffering, is an act of compassion, not despair. It invites us to stop pretending that life must always be comfortable to be meaningful. Imagine holding a fragile cup in your hands. You know one day it will break. Because you know this, you handle it with care. You savor the moments when it's whole. You wash it gently. You place it softly on the table. You love it, not despite its impermanence, but because of it. This is how the Buddha invites us to live, aware that everything changes, and therefore everything is precious. When we resist the natural flow of life, we suffer. But when we accept it, suffering begins to transform. Acceptance does not mean apathy. It means allowing what is real to be real. Recognizing that joy and pain are two sides of the same wave. The ocean of existence needs both to move. The Buddha often used the image of the lotus, a flower so pure, it grows only in the mud. Without the darkness below, the beauty above could not unfold. Our suffering is that mud, the fertile ground from which understanding, patience, and compassion bloom. Think of your own life. The moments that shaped you most were likely not the easy ones. They were the times when you were lost, when you failed, when you had to start over. Those experiences, painful as they were, broke the shell of illusion, the belief that things should always go your way. When the shell cracks, light enters. You begin to see more clearly. You begin to see others more gently. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a story told again and again, the story of Kisa Gautami, a mother whose only child had died. She was wild with grief, unable to accept the truth. She carried her lifeless child from house to house, begging for medicine to bring him back. When she came to the Buddha, he did not dismiss her pain. He said gently, "Bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has died." With hope, she set out, knocking on every door in the village. But each family told her the same story. A father gone, a mother lost, a child buried. By the end of the day, her tears had changed. She saw that death had touched every home, every heart. Her grief began to open into wisdom. She returned to the Buddha and bowed. "I understand now," she said softly. "Death is not only mine to bear, it belongs to all of us." Through her sorrow, she awakened to compassion, not only for herself, but for every being who suffers. That moment of realization was her true healing. The child was gone, but peace had returned to her heart. This story reminds us that suffering is universal, yet within it lies the seed of awakening. Each time we face our pain with mindfulness, instead of denial, understanding begins to take root. Each time we breathe through discomfort, instead of running away, the mind becomes a little freer. The path does not demand that we remove suffering from the world. It asks us to meet it wisely. The Buddha taught that suffering arises when we cling to people, to things, to ideas of how life should be. But when we loosen that grasp, we discover a freedom that does not depend on conditions. Imagine standing beside a river. You can try to hold the water in your hands, but it will always slip through your fingers. Or you can sit quietly and let it flow, watching the sunlight dance on its surface. The first way exhausts you, the second way liberates you. In the same way, life is a current that moves. We suffer when we try to make it stand still. But when we trust its flow, even loss becomes part of the beauty. This is not resignation, it is awakening. It is the gentle wisdom that knows nothing stays, and that's okay. The Buddha's insight is timeless because it speaks to the human condition itself. Whether in ancient India or the modern world, the causes of suffering have not changed. Desire, anger, and ignorance. We chase what we want, we resist what we dislike, and we forget the nature of things. Yet the antidote, too, remains the same: awareness. To see clearly is to begin to heal. When awareness deepens, even small pains become teachers. The irritation of waiting in line can teach patience. The ache of loneliness can open the heart to others. The fragility of life can remind us to love more fully, to speak more kindly, to let go more easily. The world does not need to be perfect for us to find peace within it. Peace begins when we stop demanding that life match our expectations. In this recognition, compassion expands. We no longer divide the world into me and them, happy and unhappy, lucky and unlucky. We see that every being is moving through their own lessons, carrying joys and burdens unseen. Suffering becomes a thread that connects us, not a wall that separates us. The Buddha once said, "Just as rain falls on the mountain, the valley, and the plain alike, so does my compassion fall equally upon all beings." To see suffering clearly is to awaken this kind of boundless compassion. It's what allows us to be kind even when others are unkind, to understand instead of judge, to forgive without needing an apology. In the end, the truth of suffering is not meant to discourage us. It is meant to awaken us. Because only when we stop running from pain do we begin to understand what real peace feels like. A peace that does not depend on things going right, but on the wisdom of the heart that knows how to rest in what is. As you listen to these words, take a slow, gentle breath. Feel the air enter and leave, reminding you of life's impermanence. Every breath, a small birth and a small letting go. Let this awareness settle softly in your chest. Whatever pain you have known, whatever loss you have carried, it is not a sign of failure. It is the same human experience that once opened the eyes of a prince under the Bodhi tree. Suffering is the first step on the path to freedom. It is the bell that wakes us from the dream of control, the teacher that shows us where we still cling, the mirror that reflects our shared humanity. To recognize it is not to be defeated, but to be alive, fully, tenderly, awake to the truth that even in pain, there is still beauty. Even in loss, there is still love. And so, with a soft heart and steady breath, we begin here, at the place where every journey of awakening begins. Not by turning away from suffering, but by bowing to it and saying quietly, "I see you, I am ready to learn." Part 2. The teachings. Understanding why we suffer. There is a tenderness that grows when we begin to ask why. Why do we suffer? Why does peace seem to slip away so easily? Why, even when life looks good from the outside, does the heart still feel restless inside? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are the beginning of wisdom. The Buddha himself began with these same questions, not as a philosopher seeking theories, but as a human being who wanted to understand the reality of life. When he looked deeply into his own experience, he discovered that suffering has a cause. It is not random, nor is it a punishment from some invisible hand. It arises when the heart forgets the nature of things, when it clings to what changes, resists what comes, and tries to make the world fit its desires. In this discovery, he revealed the second of the Four Noble Truths. The origin of suffering, desire, or craving, is the first root. It wears many faces: the wish for pleasure, the hunger for recognition, the fear of losing what we love. Craving whispers that if only we had this person, this job, this body, this moment, everything would finally be enough. And yet, even when we get what we want, satisfaction doesn't last. The mind soon wants more, like a cup with a small crack that can never stay full. The more we chase, the more we thirst. The Buddha compared this to drinking salt water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. This endless reaching outward is what keeps the wheel of dissatisfaction spinning. It's not that pleasure is wrong or joy is forbidden. It's that when we build our happiness on conditions that must change, we set ourselves up for heartbreak. True freedom is not found in having everything we want, but in understanding the nature of wanting itself. Then comes anger, the second root. Anger rises when the world doesn't obey our plans. It burns when someone speaks unkindly, when we feel ignored or betrayed, when life unfolds in ways we didn't choose. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." When anger fills the mind, it clouds our vision. It tells us stories that are not true, that others are our enemies, that pain must be repaid, that we are separate from those who hurt us. But if we look closely, we see that anger is not power, it is pain asking to be understood. Beneath every flare of anger is a softer wound, a fear of being unloved, unseen, unsafe. When we learn to see this, anger loses its poison. Like fire contained in a lamp, it becomes light, a strength guided by clarity rather than destruction. The Buddha never taught suppression. He taught awareness. When we feel anger, we can breathe, name it gently, and let it pass like a storm. We do not need to act from it. We can bow to it, learn from it, and let it dissolve. The third root is ignorance, not stupidity, but forgetfulness. It is the blindness of the heart that believes things are solid, separate, and lasting. It is the illusion that I am here, and the world is out there, and the two are not connected. From this misunderstanding grows all fear and confusion. We chase shadows, fight reflections, and forget that the one who suffers and the one who causes suffering are never truly apart. Ignorance is like mist on the mirror of the mind. The image we see is distorted, but the mirror itself is never harmed. When the mist clears, the reflection is bright again. The purpose of practice is not to add anything new, but to clear the mist, to see things as they are. When we see clearly, wisdom arises naturally. The Buddha expressed this understanding through the Four Noble Truths, the heart of his teaching. The first noble truth: there is suffering. The second, suffering has a cause, craving, and ignorance. The third, there is an end to suffering, a peace beyond all grasping. And the fourth, there is a path that leads there, the noble eightfold path, a way of living that brings balance to the body, mind, and heart. The teachings are simple, but not easy. They are not meant to be recited like poetry or worshipped like relics. They are a map for the human experience. We walk them one breath at a time, one moment of awareness after another. The Buddha once told a story about a man struck by an arrow. Instead of pulling the arrow out, the man demanded to know who shot it, from where, of what wood it was made, what feathers tipped it, what poison coated the tip. But while he was busy asking questions, he died from the wound. The Buddha smiled and said, "When you are shot with the arrow of suffering, remove it first. Do not waste time debating its details. Heal the wound." To understand suffering means to stop intellectualizing it and start observing it. Notice how it appears in your daily life, in the tension of wanting to be right, in the unease of comparing yourself to others, in the disappointment when plans fall apart. See how often the mind whispers, "This should not be happening." That single thought, "should not," is the doorway through which pain enters. But what happens when we let go of that demand? When we simply allow the moment to be what it is, something remarkable occurs. Peace begins to surface. The moment we stop fighting reality, reality becomes a teacher. The Buddha often used everyday examples to reveal this truth. Imagine holding a rope tightly in your fist. The harder you squeeze, the more it hurts. But the rope is not the problem. The grip is. Suffering is like that. We suffer not because life is cruel, but because we grasp it too tightly. Letting go does not mean indifference. It means releasing the strain. The rope remains, but now it no longer cuts your hand. Sometimes, letting go begins with a single breath. When you breathe in, you recognize what is here. When you breathe out, you release the urge to change it. This simple awareness is the seed of freedom. Another image the Buddha gave was that of a flame. When there is fuel, the fire burns. When the fuel is gone, the flame goes out. Suffering burns as long as craving feeds it. When craving ends, peace arises naturally. The flame is not destroyed. It simply has nothing left to cling to. In the same way, we do not destroy desire. We understand it so deeply that it no longer controls us. Every teaching the Buddha offered pointed toward the same realization. Peace is already here, beneath the noise of wanting and resisting. It is not something we must earn or create. It is revealed when the mind stops struggling. There is a story about a monk who asked the Buddha, "What is enlightenment?" The Buddha replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The monk frowned and said, "But everyone eats and sleeps." The Buddha smiled. "Yes, but not everyone eats when eating, or sleeps when sleeping." The teaching is subtle but profound. Enlightenment is not found in distant mountains or mysterious rituals. It is found in the simplicity of being fully present. To eat when eating means to be there completely, not thinking of the past, not planning the future, not judging the moment. When the mind stops dividing life into good and bad, gain and loss, it discovers a stillness that cannot be shaken. The Buddha's understanding of suffering was not only philosophical, it was deeply compassionate. He saw that every person, from kings to beggars, suffers because they misunderstand what life is. We cling to things that cannot stay, and we resist things that must come. This misunderstanding binds us to a cycle of birth and death, joy and despair, forever seeking stability in what is unstable. But the moment we see this clearly, the chain begins to loosen. To understand suffering is to understand impermanence. Everything we love will change. Everything we fear will change. We, too, are changing with every breath. And yet, impermanence is not cruel. It is the reason beauty exists. The cherry blossom is lovely because it will soon fall. The sunset is moving because it will soon fade. Every fleeting thing is precious, precisely because it cannot last. When we stop demanding that life be permanent, we begin to love more deeply. We savor the touch of a hand, the sound of laughter, the quiet morning light. We stop postponing gratitude. We stop waiting for perfect moments. We live fully in the moments we have. This is why the Buddha's teaching is sometimes called the middle way. It is the path between indulgence and denial, between craving and aversion. It is the art of balance, living with awareness, neither chasing nor rejecting, simply flowing with what is. You may have noticed how the mind loves to swing like a pendulum, from hope to fear, from excitement to regret. One moment it says, I must have this. The next, I must avoid that. But when we bring mindfulness to these movements, we find a quiet center. The pendulum keeps swinging, but the heart remains still. This is the essence of practice, not to stop the swing, but to stop being thrown by it. The Buddha's teachings are not a promise that life will become easy. They are a promise that clarity will make life livable. When we see things as they are, we stop making them heavier than they need to be. Pain may still come, but suffering, the extra weight we add through resistance, begins to dissolve. Sometimes the simplest insight can shift everything. A teacher once said, pain is what the world does to you. Suffering is what you do to yourself. Pain is inevitable. The ache of loss, the sting of words, the fatigue of the body. But suffering arises when we say, this should not be. When we meet pain with acceptance, it remains pain, sharp but pure, passing like a wave. When we meet it with resistance, it multiplies. Understanding this changes the way we move through life. We begin to meet difficulties not with panic, but with curiosity. Instead of saying, why me? We whisper, what is this teaching me? Every frustration becomes an invitation to look inward. Every disappointment becomes a chance to soften. Life itself becomes a teacher, moment by moment. And yet, this understanding is not meant to be cold or detached. True wisdom is warm. It embraces suffering with tenderness. When the Buddha spoke of compassion, he did not mean pity. Compassion is the courage to stay present with pain, our own and others, without trying to flee or fix it immediately. It is the gentle knowing that says, this, too, is part of the path. When we live this way, even small acts become sacred. Listening to someone's story without interruption, washing the dishes with full attention, breathing slowly before we speak. These moments of mindfulness weave peace into the fabric of ordinary life. The Buddha once told his disciples that awakening is not something far away. It is as close as our next breath. The path begins here, where we are, with the life we already have. Understanding suffering does not mean never feeling sad again. It means knowing sadness without becoming it, knowing anger without being consumed by it, knowing joy without clinging to it. This is the wisdom of balance, a heart wide enough to hold all things, gentle enough not to be broken by them. When we live in this awareness, we begin to taste what the Buddha called nibbana, the cooling of the fire, the peace that comes when craving ceases. So as you listen now, let your breath slow down. Let each inhale remind you that life is unfolding right here, and each exhale remind you that you can let go. Suffering has its causes, but it also has its end. The same mind that creates pain can also uncover peace. In understanding why we suffer, we begin to see that freedom is not somewhere else. It is born in this very moment of understanding. Like the Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, we, too, can open our eyes to the simple truth. Everything changes, everything teaches, and everything, even suffering, can be a path to awakening. And with that knowing, the heart softens, the mind becomes still, the world, though imperfect, begins to shine quietly again, just as it is. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest, take in a slow, quiet breath, and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Part 3. The everyday faces of suffering. When people hear the word suffering, they often imagine something large: illness, loss, tragedy, death. But suffering also lives quietly in the ordinary. It hides in the spaces between our routines, in the silent moments when we wish things were just a little different. It is in the morning when we wake up already tired, in the evening when we lie down but the mind refuses to rest. It is in the way we rush from one task to another, believing that peace will come after the next thing is done, only to find that peace keeps moving further away. The Buddha did not speak of suffering to frighten us. He spoke of it because he saw how deeply it touches every life, how even the smallest moments of restlessness can shape the way we see the world. Suffering is not only the storm, it is also the subtle ache in the heart that says, something is missing. We look for comfort in success, in love, in approval, in distraction, but the mind, once trained to chase, rarely stops. In the modern world, suffering often wears the mask of busyness. We fill our days until there is no space left to breathe. We scroll endlessly through screens, seeking connection, yet feeling increasingly alone. We chase goals that promise fulfillment, yet when we reach them, we immediately begin searching for the next. This quiet emptiness, this constant reaching, is a form of dukkha, not a dramatic pain, but a subtle tension that keeps us from resting in the present. The Buddha described this as the fever of the mind. It is the unease that arises when we live as though we are always one step away from happiness. We imagine that happiness waits in the future, in a different job, a different partner, a different version of ourselves. But the future never truly arrives, and so we live suspended, never fully alive where we are. To understand suffering in its everyday form, we must look gently at our own lives. Notice how often irritation arises when things move too slowly, or anxiety appears when we feel out of control. Notice how disappointment creeps in when people fail to meet our expectations. These moments are small, but together they form the texture of our daily experience. To awaken is not to eliminate these feelings, but to see them clearly, without judgment. There is a story in the ancient texts about a man who was shot by 2 arrows. The first arrow represents the inevitable pain that life brings. The body ages, people leave, plans fail. The second arrow is the pain we create by resisting the first. The thoughts of, why me? This shouldn't have happened. I can't live like this. The Buddha said that while we cannot always avoid the first arrow, we can choose not to shoot the second. The art of living lies in this gentle restraint, to let the first arrow come and go, and not add another layer of suffering through our thoughts. This is what mindfulness teaches us, to see the moment before we react, to feel the wave before we drown in it. A painful emotion rises, and instead of pushing it away, we acknowledge it softly. This is sadness, this is fear, this is anger. When named gently, these feelings lose their sharpness. They become guests rather than enemies. The heart learns that it can hold pain without collapsing. One day, a disciple asked the Buddha, "Master, what should we do when we feel overwhelmed by pain?" The Buddha replied, "When a strong wind blows across the forest, the trees that survive are those that bend." The meaning is clear. Resistance breaks us, flexibility saves us. Suffering asks us to bend, to soften the rigid ideas we have about how life should be, and to meet reality as it is. Sometimes, our suffering comes from comparison. We measure ourselves against others, their beauty, their success, their peace, and we forget that we are seeing only the surface. Behind every smile, there is a story. Behind every calm face, a struggle unseen. The Buddha once said, "Do not envy what others have. You do not know the cost they paid for it." Comparison blinds us to our own path. It tells us we are behind when in truth, life cannot be compared, because each being walks their own unique road toward awakening. There is another form of suffering, the kind that comes from not forgiving ourselves. We carry guilt like a stone in our pocket, long after the moment has passed. We replay old mistakes, hoping to rewrite them, but the past remains unchanged. The Buddha taught that remorse has value only when it leads to wisdom, not when it leads to self-punishment. When we understand why we acted as we did, we can learn, grow, and let go. As long as we keep judging ourselves, the heart cannot rest. True forgiveness is not forgetting. It is understanding. It is saying, "I did the best I could with what I knew then. Now I know better." Daily suffering also shows itself in our relationships. We love deeply, and because we love, we fear loss. We cling to people as though they could protect us from impermanence. But love is not meant to be a cage. The Buddha once said that attachment is not the same as love. Attachment says, "I need you to make me happy." Love says, "I wish for your happiness, even when it's not with me." When love becomes spacious, it no longer causes pain. It becomes a source of peace. To live in awareness is to see these patterns of attachment and fear without harshness. When you notice yourself clinging, you can pause, breathe, and whisper inwardly, "Ah, here is the mind wanting to hold." This small recognition is already freedom. Awareness transforms habit into understanding. The more we practice seeing, the less we are controlled by what we see. The Buddha's teachings on suffering are not abstract ideas. They are deeply human observations. He did not stand above the world, untouched. He walked through it with the same body, the same emotions, the same uncertainties we know today. He understood that to be born is to meet both joy and sorrow. The difference lies in how we meet them. When we meet suffering with resistance, we suffer twice. When we meet it with awareness, we begin to heal. Healing, in the Buddhist sense, is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to stay present through it. Like a calm lake that reflects the storm without being destroyed by it, a mindful mind reflects pain without drowning in it. Sometimes, in meditation, pain feels unbearable, a restless thought, a discomfort in the body, an emotion that won't release. The instinct is to run, but the practice is to stay. As we breathe and stay, we notice that everything changes. Sensations arise and fade, emotions swell and subside. We begin to see that suffering is not solid, it is movement, it is energy that comes and goes. This insight gives us courage to stay with life, no matter what it brings. There is a story about a monk who sat in deep meditation while mosquitoes bit his skin. When someone asked how he endured the irritation, he said, "Each bite teaches me patience. When I resist, I suffer. When I accept, I am free." The story is not about mosquitoes. It is about all the small irritations of life. The traffic, the arguments, the delays. They can become prisons, or they can become teachers. The choice depends on our awareness. Modern suffering often takes the shape of loneliness. Even when surrounded by people, many hearts feel unseen. The Buddha spoke of this too. He said that loneliness arises when we forget our interconnection with all beings, when we believe we are separate, isolated, alone. In our pain, the heart contracts. But when we remember that every living being wants happiness and fears suffering, compassion awakens. Loneliness begins to melt in the warmth of empathy. To cultivate this awareness, we can practice what the Buddha called metta, loving kindness. It begins with a simple intention: may I be well, may I be peaceful. Then we extend it outward: may you be well, may you be peaceful. Gradually, this circle expands until it includes those we love, those we struggle with, and finally, all beings, everywhere. Metta transforms suffering because it dissolves the illusion of separation. When the heart expands, pain no longer isolates, it connects. And yet, even with all our understanding, pain still visits us. We lose what we love, we fall ill, we age. The Buddha never denied this. He simply showed that we can suffer wisely. Wise suffering is not numbness, it is tenderness. It allows pain to be what it is, while remembering that we are larger than it. Think of the sky. Storms come and go, but the sky remains vast and open. The clouds may darken it, but they cannot harm it. In the same way, suffering passes through the awareness of the heart, but the awareness itself remains untouched. When we learn to rest in that space, the space of knowing, we discover a peace that cannot be taken away. Sometimes we hear people say, everything happens for a reason. But the Buddha's view is gentler. He taught that everything happens through causes and conditions. Not everything has a hidden purpose, but everything can be understood. And when we understand, we can choose how to respond. The rain may fall, we cannot stop it, but we can hold an umbrella or simply choose to dance. Suffering, then, is not an enemy, but a mirror. It reflects where we cling, where we resist, where we forget who we truly are. It invites us to wake up. Each moment of discomfort is a door, not one we must force open, but one that opens naturally when we bring awareness to it. Behind that door lies the same freedom the Buddha found, the freedom to be at peace in an impermanent world. So when suffering appears, as sadness, loneliness, anger, confusion, don't rush to push it away. Sit with it as you would sit with a dear friend. Ask it what it has come to teach you. Listen quietly. Every pain carries a message. let go, look deeper, return to what is true. As we move through the ordinary days of our lives, we can carry this understanding like a gentle light. In traffic, in conversation, in silence, awareness becomes our companion. Slowly, suffering loses its sharp edges. It doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes compassion. It becomes wisdom. It becomes love. And perhaps this is the most profound teaching of all. The Buddha never promised a world without pain. He promised a heart that could meet pain with peace. To recognize the everyday faces of suffering is to begin this journey, to see that even the smallest ache, when understood, can lead us closer to awakening. So as you breathe now, let your heart soften. Feel the air move in and out, reminding you that everything changes, and that change itself is not your enemy. Within each breath, there is a lesson, the arising, the fading, the letting go. This is the rhythm of all things. And in this rhythm, if you listen closely, you will hear the quiet truth that the Buddha heard long ago. Suffering is not a punishment nor a mistake. It is the beginning of understanding, the first whisper of awakening calling you home. Part 4. The Parable of Kisa Gotami and the Mustard Seed. There is an ancient story told through generations of monks, lay followers, and seekers of truth. The story of Kisa Gotami, a mother whose suffering opened the door to understanding. It is not just a story about loss, but about awakening. It reminds us that grief, though deeply personal, is also universal. It teaches that through the pain of impermanence, we discover compassion, wisdom, and the quiet acceptance of life as it truly is. Kisa Gotami was once a young woman filled with the ordinary joys of family life. She lived in a small village, her heart tender and full of love for her only child. The boy was her light, the pulse of her days. Every smile of his made her forget the hardships of living. But one day, that light went out. The child fell ill, and no medicine could save him. Within days, the small body that had once clung to her arm lay lifeless. The house that had echoed with laughter now echoed with silence. Her world collapsed. Kisa Gotami could not accept what had happened. Her heart refused to believe that something so dear, so full of life, could suddenly end. In her unbearable grief, she carried her child's body in her arms, wandering from house to house, pleading, "Please, help me. Please, give me medicine to bring my son back." Some villagers wept for her, others turned away, whispering that she had gone mad. But her sorrow was not madness, it was love that had nowhere left to go. Love, when faced with impermanence, becomes grief, a longing for what the heart cannot hold. Eventually, a kind man told her, "Go to the Buddha. He is said to know the ways beyond life and death." With a flicker of hope, she went to him. When she stood before the Buddha, her voice trembled. "Please, Master, my child is sick. Give me medicine to cure him." The Buddha looked at her gently. He saw not madness, but the raw wound of the human heart, the same wound every being must face in its own time. He did not deny her suffering, nor did he dismiss her request. Instead, he said softly, "Yes, there is a medicine, but first, you must bring me a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one has ever died." Her eyes brightened. "I will find them," she said, and she ran from the monastery, clutching her child to her chest. She went door to door throughout the village. At the first house, she knocked and asked, "Have you ever lost someone to death?" The family looked at her with sadness. "Yes," they said, "our father passed away last year." She moved to the next home. "Has anyone here died?" A woman replied, "My sister, my husband, and my son are gone." Again and again she asked, and always the answer was the same. In every house, behind every door, there was a story of loss. As the day faded, the truth began to sink into her heart. Death had touched every family, every home, every heart. Hers was not the only grief. She began to understand that what she called her pain was, in truth, the pain of the whole world. By the time she returned to the Buddha, the child's body no longer rested in her arms. She had laid him gently in the forest, beneath a tree. Her face was no longer wild with despair, but calm and quiet. When she stood before him again, she bowed deeply and said, "I could not find a single house untouched by death. I understand now, death is not mine alone to bear. It belongs to all beings." The Buddha looked at her with compassion and said, "You have found your mustard seeds, Gautami." The medicine was understanding. This simple story carries the essence of the Dharma, that suffering, though deeply personal, is never private. It is shared by all beings. The moment we recognize this, the heart opens and compassion is born. In this story, the mustard seed represents awareness. It is the seed of wisdom that grows when we face the truth directly. Before her encounter with the Buddha, Kisa Gautami saw the world through the lens of her own grief. She believed she was singled out by tragedy. Her pain isolated her. But through seeing the suffering of others, her pain became connection. The wound that once separated her from the world became the bridge that united her with it. The Buddha's teaching here is subtle. He did not give her words of comfort or promises of another life. He offered her the opportunity to see for herself, to walk through the truth, not around it. He did not heal her grief by taking it away. He transformed it by helping her see that it was shared by every living thing. This is the heart of compassion, not to erase pain, but to see it clearly, to understand it, and to allow it to awaken wisdom. When we see that suffering is universal, we no longer fight against it. We begin to soften toward it, in ourselves and in others. Kisa Gautami's story is not only about death, it is about letting go of the illusion of control. Every one of us, in some form, carries what she carried: the wish to hold on to what must pass, the belief that life should conform to our desires. When something we love is taken, we feel betrayed, as if the world has broken a promise. But life never promised permanence, it promised change. The Buddha called this impermanence anicca, the constant flow of arising and passing, birth and death, joy and loss. To resist it is to resist the very nature of life itself. When we realize this, a gentle wisdom begins to grow, the wisdom of letting go. Letting go does not mean forgetting or ceasing to care. It means releasing the grip of illusion. It means loving without trying to own. It means allowing each moment to be what it is, and each being to walk their own path. The Buddha often compared human life to the flame of a lamp. When the oil is gone, the flame naturally goes out. There is no tragedy in this. It is the natural order of things. The tragedy lies only in our refusal to see it. Death is not a punishment, but a continuation of the same truth that governs all existence. Everything that begins must end, and in that ending, space is made for something new. In modern life, we experience this truth every day, though we may not notice it. Friendships drift apart, children grow and leave home. Moments of joy pass quickly, no matter how much we wish to hold them. The seasons themselves remind us of this endless rhythm. Spring blooms, summer thrives, autumn fades, and winter rests. Every ending carries within it the seed of beginning. Kisa Gotami's awakening was not an escape from sorrow, but a transformation through it. The grief did not disappear, but it became illuminated by understanding. She no longer clung to the impossible wish that her son return. Instead, she saw the fragility of all life and vowed to live with compassion for all who suffer. In that way, her love for her child expanded to include the world. What had been personal grief became universal compassion. This transformation is available to all of us. Whenever we are faced with loss, the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the fading of a dream, we can ask ourselves, can I see this not as punishment, but as part of the natural unfolding? If we can pause, breathe, and look deeply, we will see that loss and love are not opposites. They exist together, like the wave and the sea. One cannot be without the other. The Buddha's compassion toward Kisa Gotami also teaches us how to help others in their suffering. He did not offer empty words. He offered presence, patience, and a path of direct seeing. When someone we love is in pain, it is not our task to fix them. It is our task to sit beside them, to be the stillness that reminds them they are not alone. Sometimes the greatest healing happens not through answers, but through silent understanding. There is a passage in the scriptures where the Buddha says, "The wise grieve, yet they do not drown in grief. They feel the wound, but they do not become the wound." This is the art of mindful sorrow, to allow the heart to ache, but not to close, to let tears fall, but to know that within those tears, understanding is forming. The story of Kisa Gotami is a mirror for all of us. We all carry something we cannot bring back, a person, a time, a dream. We all have moments when we wander, like she did, seeking a cure that cannot be found in the world outside. But the true healing begins when we stop running and begin to see. When we realize that suffering is not a curse but a teacher, we begin to grow in wisdom and compassion. If you have ever lost someone you love, you already know this truth. At first, the world feels empty, meaningless. But as time passes, you may begin to sense their presence not in form, but in the space they've left behind, in the lessons they gave you, in the tenderness their memory awakens. The pain remains, but it softens. It becomes love without attachment, love purified by understanding. This is what Kisa Gotami discovered. Her love did not end when her child died. It changed form. It became vast, boundless, free from clinging. It became compassion for all who mourn. And that is the greatest transformation of all, when personal pain blossoms into universal love. The Buddha once said, "From understanding death comes understanding of life." When we see that everything we love is temporary, we stop wasting time on trivial things. We speak more kindly. We forgive faster. We cherish the people around us, knowing that every shared moment is a gift. Awareness of death does not make life darker, it makes it brighter, more precious. In the stillness of meditation, when we observe the breath, we can see this same truth in motion. Each inhale is birth, each exhale is death. The breath arises and fades, just like every moment of our existence. Between the two is a pause, a space of peace, of pure being. Life, death, and stillness, all contained within a single breath. When we live with this awareness, we begin to walk the path of the awakened heart. We no longer demand that life be free from loss. We understand that to live fully is to love deeply. and to love deeply is to accept the risk of loss. Suffering no longer feels like an interruption of life, but a part of its music, a note that gives meaning to the whole song. And so, when grief comes, we can meet it as Kisa Gotami did, not with denial, but with openness. We can hold our sorrow like a child, tenderly, without judgment. We can allow it to teach us the truth of impermanence and the boundless capacity of the human heart. Suffering shared becomes compassion. Pain understood becomes wisdom. Loss accepted becomes love. This is the medicine the Buddha offered, not a way to erase the storms, but a way to stand in the rain and see its beauty. When the Buddha looked into Kisa Gotami's eyes and saw her tears transformed into clarity, he smiled softly. "Now you understand," he said. "All things arise and pass. Only the truth remains, the truth of awareness." As you listen now, let this story rest quietly in your heart. Remember, every grief, every ending, every heartbreak carries the potential of awakening. You are not alone in your sorrow. All beings have walked this path. And if you stay with your pain long enough, it will reveal its secret, that beneath all loss lies love, and beneath all love lies the infinite peace of letting go. Part 5. Seeing suffering as a teacher. When we first meet suffering, we usually want to escape. It feels heavy, unfair, and cruel, like a storm that has singled us out. But in time, if we stay with it gently, we may come to see that suffering is not an enemy at all. It is a teacher, one that speaks a language beyond words. Every pain, every loss, every disappointment holds within it a lesson about the nature of life, love, and awareness. The Buddha discovered this not through theories or beliefs, but by sitting quietly under the Bodhi tree, facing the reality of suffering without turning away. Through that stillness, he saw that suffering itself is the path, the very doorway to awakening. We often imagine that awakening means freedom from all pain, but the Buddha's awakening was not an escape from the world. It was an intimate understanding of it. He saw that the same conditions that cause suffering, desire, fear, impermanence, also contain the seed of liberation. The difference lies in how we meet them. When we meet pain with resistance, it multiplies. When we meet it with mindfulness, it transforms. There is a story of the Buddha meeting a man who came to him in anger and confusion. "Why is life so full of pain?" the man demanded. "Even when I do good, I suffer. Even when I try to love, people hurt me." The Buddha listened silently. Then he said, "Suffering is not a punishment, it is a mirror. When you look into it clearly, you see what still needs to be understood." The man frowned, not satisfied. The Buddha continued, "When you touch fire, it burns. The fire is not punishing you, it is teaching you that heat can hurt. In the same way, when you cling to what changes, the pain that follows is not a punishment, it is a reminder of the truth you have forgotten." This is how suffering becomes a teacher. It points us back to the laws of life we often ignore. It shows us what happens when we live in forgetfulness, when we grasp, when we resist, when we expect permanence in an impermanent world. Through every painful experience, we are being invited to remember. One of the Buddha's most beautiful teachings is the image of the lotus. The lotus is a flower of rare purity, but it can only grow in muddy water. It draws its strength from the very darkness that surrounds it. Without the mud, there can be no lotus. In the same way, without suffering, there can be no compassion. Without loss, there can be no understanding of love. Our pain does not make us broken, It makes us capable of depth. It teaches the heart to expand beyond its own walls. To see suffering as a teacher is to stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" It is to shift from resistance to curiosity, from rejection to awareness. When we bring mindfulness into our pain, it changes shape. The same feeling that once overwhelmed us becomes something we can observe, breathe through, and even learn from. The Buddha once said that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. What he meant was that while we cannot avoid the pain of life, the sickness, the aging, the separation, we can avoid adding the second layer, the mental struggle that says, "This should not be happening." Pain is the first arrow. Resistance is the second. When we stop shooting the second arrow, peace becomes possible even in difficulty. A monk once asked the Buddha, "How should one live wisely when life is full of change?" The Buddha answered, "By seeing all things as teachers." The monk looked puzzled, so the Buddha continued, "If you are insulted, let that moment teach you patience. If you are praised, let that moment teach you humility. If you are sick, let it teach you compassion for others who suffer. Every experience can be the ground of awakening if you meet it with awareness." The world we live in is often loud, fast, and impatient. We are taught to avoid pain, to seek comfort, to distract ourselves from discomfort. But every time we run from suffering, we also run from our greatest opportunity to grow. True spiritual maturity is not about keeping life easy. It is about learning to stay open when life becomes difficult. The Buddha called this turning toward, the act of facing what we usually avoid. Turning towards suffering does not mean wallowing in it or becoming lost in sadness. It means meeting it with a steady mind and a kind heart. Imagine holding a small bird with a broken wing. You do not ignore it, nor do you crush it with force. You hold it gently. You see its pain and care for it with tenderness. This is how we can hold our own pain, not with fear, not with judgment, but with compassion. The Buddha taught that when we meet suffering with mindfulness, three things happen. First, we begin to see impermanence, that everything, even pain, passes. Second, we see interdependence, that our suffering is not isolated, but connected to the suffering of all beings. Third, we see compassion arise naturally, because once we truly understand our own pain, we cannot help but wish for others to be free of theirs. There is a story about a man named Patakara, who lost her husband, children, and parents in a series of tragedies. Mad with grief, she wandered the streets, her clothes torn, her mind shattered. When she came to the Buddha, he did not tell her to stop crying. He simply said, "You are not alone. The tears you have shed through all your lives are more than the waters of the ocean." Hearing this, she wept even more, but her tears changed. They were no longer the tears of isolation, but of recognition. In that moment, she understood that suffering unites all beings. She became one of the Buddha's devoted disciples, teaching others that even the deepest wounds can lead to wisdom. Suffering, when understood, gives birth to empathy. It softens the edges of pride. It makes us humble, patient, and kind. A person who has suffered and truly seen their pain becomes like fertile soil, capable of nurturing compassion for others. This is why the Buddha said that the wise see pain as precious. It breaks open the shell of self-centeredness and reveals the boundless capacity of the heart. In meditation, when we sit quietly and observe the movements of the mind, we begin to notice that suffering often arises not from what happens, but from how we relate to what happens. A thought appears, "This shouldn't be. I can't bear this. It's not fair." And immediately the heart contracts. But when we bring awareness to the thought itself, without believing it, we create space. We realize that the thought is just another passing cloud in the sky of consciousness. The pain remains, but the struggle lessens. Slowly, the sky becomes wider than the storm. The Buddha's life itself was a lesson in seeing suffering as a teacher. After his enlightenment, he continued to face sickness, aging, and loss. His beloved disciples died. He experienced betrayal and slander. Yet he remained serene, not because he was immune to pain, but because he understood it. He once said, "As rain falls on mountains, valleys, and plains alike, so does my compassion fall upon all beings." His understanding of suffering became boundless compassion, embracing both those who loved him and those who misunderstood him. To follow his example is not to seek suffering, but to stop fearing it. When pain comes, instead of asking it to go away, we can ask it what it has to show us. We can sit with it, breathe with it, listen. Often, beneath the surface of our pain lies something we have long ignored, a truth we were afraid to face, an attachment we didn't want to release, a tenderness we forgot we had. When we finally allow ourselves to see it, the heart opens. Suffering teaches us about impermanence, but it also teaches us about gratitude. When we truly know that nothing lasts, we begin to cherish everything more deeply. The morning sun, the laughter of a friend, the sound of rain, all become miracles. When we lose the illusion of control, we gain the gift of appreciation. The Buddha encouraged his followers to reflect on death, not to be morbid, but to awaken joy. He said, "Of all footprints, the elephant's is the greatest. Of all contemplations, contemplation of death is the greatest." Why? Because it reminds us to live with care, to love fully, and to forgive quickly. When we look at suffering through this lens, even the hardest experiences begin to shine with meaning. The illness that humbles us teaches patience. The heartbreak that empties us teaches love without attachment. The failure that embarrasses us teaches humility and resilience. Every experience becomes part of the great teaching of life. One day, a disciple asked the Buddha, "How can I recognize a wise person?" The Buddha replied, "A wise person is one who is gentle with their suffering and gentle with the suffering of others." Wisdom and gentleness go hand in hand. To be gentle is to be strong in a quiet way, to face life's storms without losing kindness. Seeing suffering as a teacher also means seeing joy as a teacher. Joy, too, is impermanent, but it shows us the beauty of impermanence in another form. It teaches us to savor life without clinging to it. The Buddha did not reject joy. He simply taught that it must be held lightly. When we learn from both joy and sorrow, we begin to walk the middle way, the path between grasping and aversion, between indulgence and denial. If you listen deeply to your own life, you may notice how suffering has shaped you. Perhaps a difficult childhood made you sensitive to the pain of others. Perhaps loss taught you the value of presence. Perhaps mistakes taught you humility. These are not scars to hide, but wisdom marks, reminders of how the heart learns. Suffering, then, is not something we need to overcome before we can awaken. It is the very material of awakening. Like clay in the potter's hands, it shapes us, molds us, refines us. The fire of difficulty hardens the vessel, making it strong enough to hold compassion. Without that fire, we remain fragile, easily shattered by life's changes. In the end, the Buddha's message is simple. Suffering understood becomes wisdom. Suffering resisted becomes bondage. The difference is mindfulness. When we bring gentle awareness to pain, we transform it. The same energy that once fueled anger can fuel compassion. The same grief that once closed the heart can open it wider. So, when suffering comes, as it always does, in small or large forms, meet it softly. Do not push it away. Do not cling to it. Sit with it as you would with an old friend who has something important to tell you. Listen. In its silence, you may hear the deepest truth of all, that even in the midst of pain, there is peace waiting to be seen. As this chapter closes, take a slow breath. Let it move gently through you. Feel how life, even with all its imperfections, continues to flow. The Buddha's path does not ask us to be without suffering. It asks us to see suffering clearly, to bow to it, to learn from it, and to let it guide us back to compassion. For in the end, the greatest teacher we will ever have is life itself, and life, in all its mystery and tenderness, always speaks through the language of change. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required. Just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 2: Transforming Death, the Death of Habits. Part 1: What it means to die before dying. There is a kind of death that has nothing to do with the body. It is not the final breath that leaves the chest, nor the silence that follows a heartbeat. It is quieter, more subtle, a death that happens many times within a single life. It is the death of an illusion, the fading of an old identity, the falling away of a habit that once defined who we thought we were. The Buddha called this transformation through dying a way of awakening long before the body reaches its end. We usually think of death as something distant, a shadow waiting at the edge of time. But in truth, death is happening every moment. Every breath that enters and leaves is a small birth and death. Every thought that arises and passes away is a brief existence ending in silence. Cells in our bodies die and renew constantly. The world around us changes in every second. Clouds dissolve, flowers wilt, waves break and return to the sea. To live is to die, continuously, moment after moment. The Buddha spoke of two kinds of death. The first is the physical death, what he called the death of the body. This is the inevitable ending that all beings must face. No one escapes it, not kings, not saints, not even the Buddha himself. The second, however, is transformational death, the death that happens when we awaken from ignorance, when the mind lets go of its old attachments and is reborn into wisdom. The first kind of death ends a lifetime. The second kind of death begins true life. To die before dying means to allow parts of ourselves to fall away. The anger that burns us, the pride that blinds us, the habits that trap us in suffering. When these illusions die, what remains is the simple, unburdened presence of awareness. This is not the death of the person, but the death of everything false about the person. In Buddhist teaching, this process is called the death of habit energy. Our habits of thought, of speech, of emotion are like invisible strings pulling us into the same mistakes again and again. We react to life not as it is, but as our conditioning makes it seem. We become prisoners of our own patterns. Every moment we act out of anger or greed, an old self is reborn. Every moment we see clearly and let go, a new self is born. Imagine a candle flame. The flame you see this second is not the same flame as the one before. It is always burning, always changing, yet it appears continuous. Our lives are like that flame, an endless series of small births and small deaths. To recognize this is to begin to understand impermanence, and in understanding impermanence, we touch freedom. There is an old story from the Buddha's time about a monk who once asked, "Master, what does it mean to die before dying?" The Buddha smiled and said, "It means to let die what keeps you asleep." The monk pondered this, unsure what it meant. Later that evening, he noticed how easily irritation rose in him when another monk took his seat. His pride whispered, "That is my place." Then he remembered the Buddha's words and decided to let the thought die instead of feeding it. In that small act, something within him shifted. His old self, the one that clung to position and pride, had died, and in its place arose a calm awareness, fresh and alive. That is the meaning of dying before dying, the gentle, repeated surrender of what no longer serves peace. Each time we see our attachment clearly and let it dissolve, a part of our suffering dies. Each time we forgive, instead of retaliating, a part of our anger dies. Each time we choose presence over distraction, a part of our confusion dies. These deaths are not to be feared. They are the births of wisdom. The Buddha often described spiritual practice as a kind of shedding. Just as a snake must shed its old skin to grow, so must we release what we've outgrown. Holding on to anger, resentment, or craving is like wearing a skin that has become too tight. It restricts, suffocates, and causes pain. The act of letting go may sting at first, but it brings space, air, and lightness. In that letting go, a new life begins. This is why the Buddha did not speak of enlightenment as a grand achievement, but as a great unburdening. He said, "Just as the moon becomes clear when the clouds are gone, the mind becomes radiant when the delusions die. The path is not about gaining something new, but allowing what obscures our true nature to fall away." To die before dying also means to let the ego fade, the constant story we tell ourselves about who we are and how the world should treat us. The ego clings to identity. I am this kind of person. I must always be right. I must always be admired. But every identity is fragile. When life challenges those roles, we suffer. The Buddha taught that the sense of I is not fixed. It is a collection of conditions, thoughts, and memories that rise and fall like waves. To see this is to begin to die to the illusion of a permanent self. This inner dying does not make us cold or detached. On the contrary, it opens the heart. When the walls of the ego fall, compassion naturally flows. We begin to see others not as rivals or obstacles, but as companions in the same human journey. To die to selfishness is to be reborn into love. The fear of death, physical or inner, comes from not understanding it. We fear it because we believe it is the end. But in truth, every ending is also a beginning. The leaf that falls becomes soil for new growth. The wave that breaks becomes part of the ocean again. The person who lets go of anger becomes peace itself. Death is not the enemy of life. It is the movement that makes life possible. Without it, nothing could renew. The Buddha once said, "Of all footprints, the elephant's is the greatest. Of all meditations, the meditation on death is supreme. He did not mean that we should obsess over dying, but that we should remember impermanence constantly, so that we may live more wisely. To remember that we will die, and that everything we love will change, is to see how precious each moment truly is. When we understand that we do not have forever, we stop wasting time on things that do not matter. We stop chasing illusions. We start living fully. To die before dying, then, is to live awake. It is to let each moment end as it ends, without clinging to what was or fearing what will be. It is to recognize that every breath, every experience, every relationship is temporary and therefore sacred. In this awareness, gratitude naturally arises. The great Zen teachers often said, "If you die before you die, then when you die, you will not die." This paradox means that when we let the false self dissolve while we are still alive, physical death no longer terrifies us. We have already seen through it. We know that what truly lives, awareness itself, is not born and does not die. To die before dying is to make peace with change. It is to see that endings are not failures, but fulfillments of a cycle. It is to understand that clinging to what fades is the source of all sorrow, and letting go is the gateway to peace. This does not mean we stop loving. It means we love fully, knowing that everything we love is passing. Love becomes deeper when it is free from fear. When you reflect on your own life, you may notice moments when an old version of yourself has already died. Perhaps you once believed you could not live without someone, and yet, time passed, and you healed. Perhaps you once carried anger that felt eternal, and yet, one day, forgiveness came quietly, like dawn. Those were small deaths, sacred transformations. Every time you have grown, something in you has died. So when suffering appears, when a part of your life ends, when change pulls away what you thought was permanent, remember this: you are being invited to die before dying, not to vanish, but to evolve, not to lose yourself, but to return to your truest nature. The Buddha's teaching is not about avoiding death, it is about learning to use it. When we accept that everything changes, we can let the old self die gracefully and meet each moment with fresh eyes. This is freedom, the freedom to live each day as a new beginning. Take a slow breath now. Feel it enter, feel it leave. Notice how even the breath dies to make space for the next one. This is the rhythm of existence, arising, fading, arising again. To see this clearly is to be at peace. To die before dying is to awaken to life itself. It is the art of ending well, moment by moment, so that what remains is not fear, but love. The Buddha's path begins and ends here, in the gentle courage to let go, to release the old skin, and to be reborn in awareness. Each time we do this, we walk a little closer to liberation, not after death, but here, now, in the stillness of this living moment. Part 2. The endless cycle of habitual birth and death. If we look deeply, we can see that birth and death are not distant events waiting somewhere at the edges of time. They are happening here, now, in every breath, every thought, every movement of the mind. The Buddha often said that each moment contains both arising and passing, that we are born and die thousands of times in a single day. What we call living is in truth a continuous process of becoming and dissolving. Yet most of us move through this process unconsciously, pulled by the invisible currents of habit, emotion, and memory. In Buddhist teaching, this is called the cycle of habit energy, the force that keeps us repeating the same actions, the same reactions, the same patterns of thought. Each time anger arises, and we feed it, a new self of anger is born. Each time we cling to a desire, that grasping self returns to life. And when the wave of anger or desire passes, that version of us dies, only to be reborn again when the next moment of craving or irritation appears. We live and die in these small ways constantly, often without noticing. The Buddha compared this cycle to a wheel spinning in fire. Every turn burns us, yet we keep it moving, believing we have no choice. But awareness gives us the power to pause the wheel. When we see our habits clearly, we begin to understand that we are not bound by them. We can step out of the fire and choose a new way of being. Think about the patterns that shape your life. Perhaps it is impatience that rises when things don't go your way, or fear that whispers when uncertainty appears. Perhaps it is the familiar voice of self-criticism that speaks whenever you make a mistake. These habits feel personal, but they are not unique to you. They are part of the shared conditioning of humanity, the ways the mind protects itself through repetition, even when the repetition hurts. In the cycle of rebirth described by the Buddha, beings are born into new lives according to the causes they create. But this does not only refer to future lives beyond this world. It also points to the small births and deaths that happen within the span of this very life. Each thought, each reaction is a seed. When nourished, it becomes the next moment's reality. To break the cycle, we must see the seed before it grows. Imagine a man who has lived with anger for many years. He feels it as part of his nature, quick, explosive, righteous. Each time someone crosses him, he reacts before thinking. For a moment, he feels power, then comes regret. But instead of understanding, he blames himself or others, and the cycle repeats. In every outburst, a new angry self is born, lives briefly, and dies, only to rise again when the next spark comes. This is a small version of samsara, the endless birth and death of suffering. One day, this man begins to meditate. The next time anger rises, he notices it. He feels its heat, the tightening in his chest, the impulse to shout. But instead of acting, he pauses. He breathes. In that moment of awareness, something changes. The old self of anger begins to die, not through suppression but through understanding. A new self, calm, mindful, compassionate, begins to take form. This is rebirth, not of the body but of consciousness. The Buddha once told his disciples, "Every moment you are reborn. Every moment you have the chance to begin again." These words hold immense hope. They remind us that we are not fixed. We are not condemned to repeat the same stories forever. Even the deepest habit can dissolve when seen clearly. The past may shape us, but it does not imprison us. Awareness is the key that unlocks every chain. When we live without mindfulness, habit rules us. We say the same words, make the same mistakes, love and hurt in the same ways. Life becomes mechanical, predictable, and small. But when awareness enters, something miraculous happens. The cycle begins to slow. We start to notice the space between impulse and action, between thought and speech. That space is freedom. In it, we can choose kindness instead of anger, patience instead of frustration, silence instead of reaction. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of liberation, not escaping the world, but seeing it so clearly that we are no longer trapped by our own patterns. Each time we respond with mindfulness, we plant a seed for a new kind of life. Slowly, the old world of habit dies, and a new world of wisdom begins to form. In one of the ancient stories, a disciple came to the Buddha and said, "I have practiced for many years, Yet I still find myself angry. I still repeat my old ways. I am failing. The Buddha looked at him gently and replied, "When you see your anger, that is already a new moment being born. Do not be disheartened. Each time you awaken to what is happening, a small death and rebirth occur. Keep seeing, keep beginning again." This teaching is simple but profound. We are never finished dying and never finished being born. Growth is not a single event but an unfolding. Like waves touching the shore, every insight washes away a little more of what no longer belongs. Sometimes the process of inner death feels painful. Letting go of habits means letting go of the familiar. Even suffering can feel safe when it is known. The ego resists change, whispering, "Better the pain you know than the peace you don't." But the Buddha encourages us to trust the unknown. He reminds us that what we fear as death is often only the shedding of what is false. To understand this, consider a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. From the outside, the process looks like destruction. The caterpillar dissolves into formlessness within its cocoon. But that very dissolution is what allows the wings to form. The old structure must die for new beauty to emerge. In the same way, when we let our old identities and reactions dissolve, something radiant and free begins to take shape inside us. The Buddha used another image, that of a lamp. When the oil is consumed, the flame goes out, but that is not the end. The light it gave continues in other forms, in warmth, in memory, in awareness. In the same way, when an old habit dies, the energy of it transforms. Anger can become clarity, fear can become compassion, desire can become appreciation. Nothing is wasted when it is met with mindfulness. Every teaching of the Buddha points to this truth, that awareness transforms. Ignorance turns the wheel of birth and death. Wisdom stills it. Each time we awaken, even briefly, the old world loses its power over us. To practice this in daily life, we can begin by noticing our smallest patterns, the moments we rush, the moments we complain, the moments we close off. Instead of judging them, we can pause and breathe. Awareness itself is the first act of transformation. When we see clearly, we stop feeding the cycle. One of the most powerful meditations is simply to ask, what is being born right now? What is dying right now? When joy arises, it is a birth. When the joy fades, that too is a small death. When we forgive, a new heart is born. When we cling, the old heart continues its cycle. By observing these shifts, we begin to realize that we are not the cycle itself. We are the awareness that witnesses it. This recognition changes everything. The Buddha said, "The one who sees the arising and passing of all things sees the truth." When we see the impermanent nature of all phenomena, thoughts, emotions, identities, the tightness of clinging begins to relax. We stop identifying with every feeling, every idea, every story. We learn to smile at their coming and going, like waves rising and falling on the ocean of the mind. To die and be reborn in this way is not dramatic. It is quiet, ordinary, happening in the space of a breath. When you resist gossip and choose silence, a death and rebirth. When you soften a harsh judgment, a death and rebirth. When you open your heart to someone you once resented, another death and rebirth. Through these small transformations, we begin to experience what the Buddha called nibbana, the cooling of the fires of craving and aversion. In truth, the great cycle of life and death is not something to fear. It is the natural rhythm of existence, the dance of form and emptiness. To understand it is to find peace within it. We cannot stop the waves from rising, but we can learn to surf them with grace. Each time a habit ends, the ocean of awareness expands a little more. As you listen now, take a slow, deep breath. Feel the life that enters with the inhale, and the quiet release that comes with the exhale. In this very breath, there is both birth and death, coming and going, holding and letting go. To see this is to wake up to the miracle of the present moment, the endless cycle, yes, but also the endless opportunity for freedom. Every ending is a beginning. Every death of habit is a birth of awareness. And in that understanding, we discover that life itself is not a straight line from birth to death, but a circle, infinite, tender, always inviting us to begin again. Part 3. The Transformation Death. Letting old habits die. Transformation is not a dramatic event that happens in one great flash of insight. It is something quieter, more patient, like the slow turning of the seasons. The Buddha taught that every act of letting go is a small death, and every small death gives birth to freedom. We often think of death as something final and terrifying, but the Buddha saw it differently. He saw death as a natural rhythm, not only the end of life, but the ending of delusion, anger, greed, and fear. Each time we release a harmful habit, we experience a taste of that transformation. To let an old habit die means to allow the mind to outgrow what no longer serves peace. Habits are not only actions we repeat, they are ways of seeing, ways of reacting, ways of being in the world. Some are harmless, but others become prisons that keep us from living freely. The Buddha called these habits sankharas, conditioned formations of the mind. They are like grooves worn deep into the earth. The rain of experience naturally flows through them again and again. It takes effort and mindfulness to guide the water elsewhere. Imagine a person who has spent years reacting to the world through anger. Anger becomes their first response, their familiar armor. Even when no one is attacking, they live as if life itself were an enemy. To let this habit die, they must first see it clearly. The Buddha said, "When you understand your anger, it cannot control you." Awareness is the light that begins the process of transformation. Without awareness, habits remain hidden. With awareness, they begin to dissolve. The death of habit is not a violent act. It is not suppression. It is more like the quiet fading of a flame when there is no longer fuel. When we stop feeding anger with stories, he shouldn't have said that, "I can't forgive this." The fire weakens. When we stop feeding fear with imagined dangers, fear begins to soften. When we stop feeding pride with comparison, humility appears naturally. The habit dies not because we kill it, but because we stop believing it. The Buddha often described this process through the image of a garden. Every thought, word, and action is a seed. If we water seeds of anger, they will grow. If we water seeds of compassion, they too will grow. Transformation is simply the art of choosing what to nourish. To let an old habit die is to stop watering the weeds. It requires patience because the roots are deep, but over time, new life begins to bloom. There is a story in the Buddhist texts about a man who came to the Buddha, confessing that he could not stop lying. He said, "It is part of who I am. I cannot change." The Buddha replied gently, "Then begin by watching yourself each time you lie. Do not judge it, just notice it." The man followed this advice. At first, he lied as always, but a small awareness began to grow. He noticed the tightening in his chest, the flicker of shame that followed each lie. Slowly, Lying lost its power. One day he came back to the Buddha and said, "I no longer lie. It feels like that part of me has died." The Buddha smiled and said, "Yes, and in that death, truth has been born." The man did not fight his habit. He outgrew it through mindfulness. This is the essence of the transformation. Death, awareness replacing ignorance, truth replacing delusion. Nothing needs to be forced. The change happens naturally when we stop identifying with our patterns. Transformation is not only for monks or saints, it belongs to everyone. It happens every time someone chooses kindness over irritation, honesty over deceit, patience over haste. A person who has been impatient for years can learn to pause and breathe. A person who has lived in addiction can learn to face discomfort with courage. A person who has carried guilt can learn to forgive themselves. Each of these moments is a small death, a death of the self that once clung to suffering, and each is a birth into a wider peace. The Buddha once told his disciples, "The one who conquers himself is greater than the one who conquers 1,000 men in battle." To conquer oneself does not mean to fight oneself. It means to understand. It means to see that the anger, fear, or craving we call me is only a passing condition. When we stop defending these illusions, they lose their grip. The inner battle ends not through victory, but through awakening. It is important to remember that transformation is not always comfortable. When old habits die, the mind resists. It clings to what is familiar, even if that familiarity is painful. The Buddha called this resistance craving for becoming, the mind's attachment to continuity, to remaining as it was. To face this craving, we need gentleness. Transformation cannot be forced through willpower alone. It unfolds through compassion and patience. Think of how a snake sheds its old skin. It does not rip it off in anger. It rubs gently against the earth until the skin loosens and falls away. The process takes time, but it is necessary for growth. Our spiritual transformation is much the same. We do not have to destroy our old selves. We simply allow them to fall away when they are no longer true. One of the Buddha's great disciples, Angulimala, was once a feared murderer. He had killed many people, driven by delusion and rage. But when he met the Buddha, something extraordinary happened. The Buddha did not condemn him. He simply said, "Stop, Angulimala." Those words pierced through the man's madness. He fell at the Buddha's feet and wept. From that day forward, he became a monk and devoted his life to peace. He had experienced a profound inner death, the death of hatred, the death of blindness, and from that death, compassion was born. The story reminds us that no habit, no matter how dark, is beyond transformation. The Buddha never promised that transformation would erase the scars of the past. Angulimala still faced mistrust from others. Yet within himself, he was free. The chains of habit had been broken. The Buddha said to him, "You cannot change what was done, but you can end the cycle now." This is the power of inner death. It ends the repetition of suffering. When we let old habits die, we also discover humility. We see that transformation is not about becoming perfect, but about being present. It is not about being someone else, but about being fully alive as we are, moment by moment. The Buddha often reminded his followers, awakening is not becoming, it is seeing. To see clearly is to live freely. Sometimes, transformation begins in the simplest of places. In the moment we choose to stop speaking when we could harm, or when we choose to listen instead of argue. Each choice, though small, has the power to shift the direction of our lives. The Buddha said that even a single drop of water falling again and again can wear away a stone. In the same way, consistent mindfulness wears away the stone of habit. As we let our old patterns die, life itself becomes lighter. We begin to feel less controlled by circumstances, less reactive to every change. We learn to flow, to trust, to breathe. The heart opens, and from that openness, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral rule, but as a spontaneous expression of freedom. Transformation death is not an end, it is a beginning. It is the gentle turning of the heart toward truth. Each time we see through a false belief, we come closer to peace. Each time we choose awareness over habit, we are reborn. As you listen now, take a slow breath. Feel the air entering and leaving, the tiny birth and death within it. Reflect on one pattern in your life that causes suffering, a reaction, a fear, a craving. See if you can meet it with compassion instead of judgment. See if you can let it die, even a little. This is how the Buddha taught us to live, dying many small deaths so that we may live many quiet rebirths. The death of habit is the birth of freedom. The death of ignorance is the birth of wisdom. And in the stillness of each breath, transformation continues, not in some distant heaven, but here, in the tender, ever-changing moment we call life. Part 4. A monk's rebirth, the story of renunciation. There is a beautiful story from the Buddha's time about a young man who came to the monastery seeking peace. His name was Nanda. He was handsome, wealthy, and loved by many. Yet beneath all his blessings, his heart was restless. The pleasures of the world could not silence a deeper hunger within him, a quiet call that whispered, "There must be more than this." When Nanda entered the monastery, he brought with him not only his belongings, but also his habits, his desires, his pride. On the day of his ordination, his head was shaved, his clothes were changed, and he was given a new name. As the strands of hair fell to the ground, something stirred inside him. He realized that this simple act symbolized a death, the death of the man he once was. But as the razor passed over his scalp, he also felt grief. It was not easy to let go of his old identity, the person he had known all his life. The Buddha watched him closely and said softly, "Nanda, when you remove your hair, you are not losing beauty, you are shedding attachment. When you put on the robe, you are not covering yourself, you are revealing your freedom." For many days after becoming a monk, Nanda struggled. His mind wandered back to his past, the comforts of his home, the laughter of friends, the warmth of a woman he loved. His body lived in the monastery, but his mind still lived elsewhere. One evening, he confessed his conflict to the Buddha. "I thought leaving my home would bring peace," he said, "but I feel torn between two worlds." The Buddha smiled, not with judgment, but with understanding. He said, "Leaving home is not about walking away from a place, it is walking away from attachment. When you let go of what binds you, peace follows you wherever you go." Nanda took these words to heart. From that day, he began to practice seeing his thoughts as clouds passing through the sky. When memories of pleasure arose, he watched them come and go. When discomfort appeared, he observed it without resistance. Slowly, his mind began to quiet. The old Nanda, the one ruled by desire and fear, began to fade. What remained was clarity, simplicity, and compassion. This story is not only about monks, it is about all of us. Each of us carries an old identity, a set of stories about who we think we are, our roles, our successes, our wounds, our regrets. We live inside those stories as if they were our skin. But when we practice letting go, even a little, we taste what the monk felt, the death of an old self and the birth of something freer. The Buddha often spoke about renunciation not as deprivation, but as liberation. To renounce does not mean to reject the world. It means to be no longer enslaved by it. We can still enjoy beauty, still love, still live fully, but without clinging. When attachment dies, love becomes pure. When pride dies, humility blooms. When fear dies, wisdom arises. The act of changing a name, as the monks did, carries deep meaning. A new name is not a disguise but a declaration, a reminder that we are no longer the same. Each time we outgrow a habit, a name of our past self falls away. The angry self, the jealous self, the fearful self, all of these names can die if we allow them to. What remains is not emptiness, but spaciousness. In another story, a monk named Buddha was once a great ruler. After years of ruling with power and wealth, he renounced everything to follow the Buddha. Other monks noticed that Buddha often murmured to himself, "Oh, what peace, what peace." When asked why he repeated these words, he said, "In my palace, I was surrounded by guards, yet I lived in fear. Now, alone in the forest, with no guards at all, I am safe, because I have nothing to lose, nothing to defend, nothing to fear." That is true peace. Buddha's story shows us that freedom is not about where we live or what we have. It is about what we no longer cling to. When the false sense of control dies, the heart awakens. To live like this does not require a monastery. You can live in a busy city, raise a family, work every day, and still practice renunciation in your heart. When you stop needing every moment to go your way, you are renouncing control. When you forgive instead of retaliate, you are renouncing pride. When you choose understanding over being right, you are renouncing ego. These are quiet deaths, invisible to others, but powerful in spirit. The Buddha taught that real death is not the loss of the body, but the loss of ignorance. The physical body will die no matter what, but the inner death of delusion, that is a choice. Every time we recognize a craving and let it dissolve, we experience that death. And with each small death, a deeper peace is born. Transformation, then, is a process of continual renunciation, letting oneself die so another can be born. It is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering what we truly are beneath all our masks. A monk changes his name to remind himself that identity is fluid. You can change your inner name too, each time you awaken. You can let go of the one who worries, the one who always blames, the one who must succeed, and let a gentler name rise. The one who understands, the one who forgives, the one who simply is. One evening, a young disciple asked the Buddha, "Why do we have to let go of so much? It feels like dying again and again." The Buddha replied, "Yes, it is dying, but you are dying to what keeps you asleep. When the dream ends, awakening begins. This is why the death of habit is sacred. It is not destruction, it is awakening. It is like clearing the fog that hides the mountain. The mountain was always there, radiant and unmoving, but it could not be seen until the mist dispersed. When our illusions die, our true nature shines through." Renunciation also reveals the beauty of simplicity. The more we let go, the lighter we become. Life ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a pilgrimage, not towards something far away, but toward the center of our own being. The Buddha once said, "Just as the ocean has only one taste, the taste of salt, so does my teaching have only one taste, the taste of liberation. When we let go, we begin to taste that freedom directly. Letting go, however, does not mean indifference. It is not coldness,